have a media background. I have a journalism degree.
Oh.
Even though I am doing a show like this right now, I call myself a former journalist. And so I very much understand the media landscape of stuff. I'm interested in how you consume media, and media in this case, I want to, how do you consume media, which is like your traditional places, whether that be a newspaper, with a newspaper, a radio station that's presenting news, a TV station that's presenting news. How do you consume that information? And then how do you dissect that it is actually, I don't want to use factual, but factual and not guided information towards one way or another? Because you just said something, Vicki specifically, that was like, we're in this down economy. Now, depending on what news organization you watch, they're going to tell you things are up or things are down. And so how do you as an individual consume the information and then take that information, dissect it, and realize, okay, this is how I'm going to make this educated guess and this talking point kind of piece out of that?
Sure. So when I was talking about the down economy, I was actually talking about more anecdotal.
And that's why you have to ask the question, have context on things as well, right?
No. So we had, we just had a group of graduating students, and they were trying to find jobs. And so companies currently right now are not hiring in the same numbers. But that's, I think, a short-term situation, right? So especially people were working remote, there's a lot of hiring freezes just because no one knew. So honestly, I think it's more of the uncertainty going forward, right? So we saw our second-year students not being able to find opportunities. I love how, we started this conversation talking about how in a time with fewer traditional opportunities, you can find something new, right? You can find something bigger. And so for me, it's like, I think it's more of finding that creativity and understanding that, what I personally came in to get my MBA, I probably won't do when I leave, and that's okay. And finding that new way of working, that new way of coming at my career is really interesting. But so going back to news, I mentioned at the top, I started at the Washington Post, so I consume them for sure. I have to shout out to my old workplace. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I try and do a huge mix of sources. I do like a lot of the traditional media newspapers, but I also, NPR. We are actually really lucky in our classes. We have access to a bunch of free news sources. So Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, lots of different sources.
So what's interesting out of that is you said you listen to podcasts. The overwhelming majority of podcasts are not through traditional journalists, right? But we're consuming that information and make decisions off of things that they say, right? And so do you look at the thing when you read the Wall Street Journal? Did you say the Journal or Washington Post? When you read the Washington Post and listen to this podcast, do you treat them the same as like, oh, I can trust these both the same way? Or are they?
Sure. Like, how do you weigh them? Right. Yeah. So a lot of the podcasts I listen to are from traditional news sources. Okay. So, I'm listening to like.
You're the outlier in that case.
I know. I'm ruining your point because I do listen to a lot of the traditional, but no, I think it all has to come in with skepticism, right? So as much as journalists are as unbiased as possible, you have to understand they live in a certain community, they were raised in a certain way. Like everyone has bias, whether they understand it or not. And so it's from knowing your own bias when reading the news that you can help form an educated opinion. And so I think it's really just that grain of salt mentality.
And I think to add to that, I think specifically it's exposing yourself to these different perspectives. Like this is something that we get to do through our MBA program because, we have people from all over the world. We have people from all over the country, from different backgrounds, from socioeconomic classes, from as many different perspectives perspectives as possible for a group of 100 people, and I think that's the studies have shown that we're more able to seek out information that already agrees with the ideas that we already have, that confirmation bias. And that's something that's really hard for even, the most educated people to overcome. So I think the biggest thing is getting out there, talking to people, diversifying the different sources of information you've got coming in, and then also having that ability to make decisions for yourself and do additional research.
But what's interesting out of that is the same goes for business, right? So like, hey, I want to go talk to this business owner that's completely in a different industry than me, taking that exact same piece out of that you guys just said, like, hey, like have conversations or be open to the story. That's like saying, hey, I own this retail shop. Oh, this person owns an ice cream store. Maybe those are too close enough, but like two completely different businesses. I don't know. I run Amazon and I run the local ice cream store, right? Two completely different businesses. But then if you have conversations and are open to that, you potentially are getting a new opportunity to learn from, a thirst for learning, if you will. And I think that's what's really, really important to that, is to be open to listening to stuff. And I think that's valuable. And you don't always hear that as much anymore as when Tim and I were growing up as young bucks.
I think Cara and I have even seen that when we're seeking advice, right? So we've been blessed to have a huge network of mentors, people willing to talk to us about next steps and, where we see our organization going. And there's often times where we will get literally completely contradicting ideas of what the next step should be for us. And so it's the idea of seeking out those different sources in order to form your own opinion. But and I think our crisis conversations proves that businesses should talk to one another. We've been able to simulate those situations where, a agricultural business is talking to, a home run food service, or whatever it might be, trying to keep it general.
Yeah.
thinking of participants, but also keeping it general. But having those conversations outside of your comfort zone is key.
Yeah. Something we learned about in our class, it was, the acronym is stuck in my head, that that we live in a VUCA world right now, and we learned that it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we were talking about how to have a VUCA mindset, and it sounds like a silly made up word, but that really is what we have needed to keep this project going. That it is an intrinsic part of it is that we don't know what the job situation, the environment will look like in a month. And we need to make sure that we are building something that is adaptive and flexible and able to respond quickly.